Unit 2, Population. During the course of the next unit, you will have to build upon concepts and key terms that you learned in Unit 1. And if time permits, please watch the video that is on this slide. The objectives for this lesson is explain where the world's population is distributed. Then describe how human geographers measure population. Your ICANN statements: 1. Describe the distribution of the world's population. 2. List the 4 population clusters in the world. 3. Define overpopulation. And 4. Define ecumen and explain where and why to world's population and distribution. We look at demography. It's the study of population. Just as a general rule of thumb when looking at population, families in more developed countries contain less family or less people than in the past. And when we look at less developed countries, they contain more people, or the rapid growth of population, as we can see with this interactive visual to the right. There are significant population issues, and we talk about population issues. They can rise from food supply to reduction of pollution to economic growth and distribution of resources. We are looking at a point in American history where population is at unprecedented levels with exceeding 7.6 billion people, and we're on a record pace to increase population, especially where in less developed regions where we see over 95% of all population growth. Again, when we look at poor countries, we'll get into development next unit, and that will be talking about areas of the world that are found primarily below the 30-degree north parallel, as you can see in this visual. But we also have enclaves of population increases, and those would be urban areas versus rural areas. When we talk about overpopulation, it's not just a simple problem of a matter of total number of people on Earth, but it also includes the relationship of people and the availability of resources. So if the number of resources do not keep up with the population, we can see that as an area of overpopulation. When we begin to examine regions of the world, one of the regions of the world where we see overpopulation as a concern would be sub-Saharan Africa. And again, overpopulation, we want to understand the number of people. Just because you have a high number of people, you might still be able to produce a number of resources to meet the needs of those people. And then when we look at the fast-growing rates of population in less developed regions, where we see 95% of all population growth, there are some regions of the world that are found in those LDCs that cannot keep up with the food supply needed to sustain human life. And how many people can the Earth support? Then it comes down to theorists, and different theorists state whether or not we can support a population that continues to grow. And we'll take a look at those theorists in a little bit. When we look at this map, think about what map this is. This is good for those of you that said cartogram, where we see the size of the country is representative of the population. We can see the 2 most populated countries in the world are both China and India. When we look at population statistics, we see about both those countries really close. Many projections state that India will surpass China this year or in the next couple years. India has the fastest population growth, and then we can see the 3rd most populated country is the United States. But relatively speaking, the United States population is significantly less than that of China and India. When we think of it this way, China and India combine for nearly 2.5 of 7 people in the globe. When we look at population clusters, we find East Asia. China's number 1, the most populated country. We look at East Asia. We see 1/4 of the world's population is in East Asia. 5/6 of East Asians live in China. It's the 4th largest country in land size. Most of the population resides along the coastlines or along the Hung River and the Yangtze River. 1/2 of the people live in rural areas in China. This is we'll talk about later in development. This will hinder China's development. Then we look at South Asia. 1/4 of the world's population is found in South Asia. So when we take East Asia and South Asia, they account for 1/2 of the world's population. 3/4 of the people in South Asia live in India, and India is the fastest growing country, and the total population is ranked number 2 in the world. Then we look at Europe, and Europe is another cluster, but it's a fast declining cluster in the world. It's the fastest declining of the top 4 population areas of the world. Most of the population is in urban areas, where 3/4 of the residents live in urban areas. And we can see a correlation. When you see an increase in urban areas, there's going to be a decrease in natural increase rate or total population growth. And then the 4th cluster is Southeast Asia. And when we look at Southeast Asia, we're looking at Indonesia is the largest country. We have over 600 million people that live in Southeast Asia. When we look at Indonesia, the islands of Java, Sumatra are the most populated countries in Indonesia. And then we have other countries like Borneo and Papua New Guinea and Philippines that also have large populations. When we talk about the fastest emerging population cluster in the world, Sub-Saharan Africa has the fastest natural increase rate. It will be a population cluster in the next decade to 2 decades. And then other population clusters, we think of major cities in developed regions, and that would be the population cluster of the Northeast, stretching from Boston, Massachusetts, down to Washington, D.C., and which is referred to as a megapolis. We can take a look at this, what kind of map? Choropleth map, very good. We can see the population distribution highlighted, where we see half of the world found in East Asia and South Asia, with the dark red along, the Ganges River in India, in northern India. And then we can see the urban populations of Europe, and then we can see the fastest population growth in Sub-Saharan Africa, where we see the dark green, and we see the emergence of the light pink, and then red, where we see major cities like Lagos, Nigeria, which is the fastest growing population in Sub-Saharan Africa. Nigeria is the fastest growing population of any country in Sub-Saharan Africa. And then we can see the population clusters in the northeast, and then down near Mexico City, and then along coastlines is South America. We can see it follows Ecumen. Ecumen is habitable land of humans. Humans can't live in 4 areas defined by Rubinstein and other human geographers, where it's too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry. And we can see a lot of population lives in the climate zones of the humid continental, or the humid low latitude. And then we also have warm mid latitudes. Those are known as humid continental climate zones. 3/4 of the world's population live on only 5% of the Earth's surface. So if we took this map and we did a mashup map with the previous population distribution map, we could see that population only takes up 5% of Earth's surface. Dry land accounts for 20% of the land's surface. Wetlands account for, they account for very high levels of population. Which is mostly found in South America, Central Africa, and Southeast Asia. Rain and heat deplete nutrients from the soil, so it makes for a strong case of overpopulation. Cold land are the polar regions, and you'll see less precipitation, very low ecumen in the cold lands. And then we have the highlands, and those are high elevation, the high steep mountains, for example, like Switzerland, and in the Himalayas, we see low populations that would be residing in those mountaintops. Okay, again, Ecumen is permanent human settlement, and we just talked about how it's influenced by climate and topography and the availability of resources. It has increased over history. I already stated that 75% lives in 5% of the land, and think about the first human inhabitants always followed water routes, rivers. And so when we look at population distributions around that 5%, most is going to be found near a water source, specifically a river. And then we also have sparsely populated areas, which I've already mentioned. All right, so how do human geographers determine population density and distribution? Well, they do it three ways. One is arithmetic density. That's looking at the number of people per land area unit. For instance, we look at Monaco. There are 33,000 people that live per square mile, whereas in Mongolia, in East Asia, only 5 people were per square mile. So we would say Mongolia has a very low arithmetic density, whereas Monaco has a very high arithmetic density. Another form of density is the psychological density. That's the number of people per arable land. In other words, arable means you can farm the land and produce crops that sustain healthy nutrients for human life. And when we look at agricultural density, it can be we also look at the relationship of population and resources. And psychological density is the one key density that will help us understand whether or not an area of the world is overpopulated. And then the third density is agricultural density, and that's going to be the number of farmers per arable land. We look at the relationship between farmers and their productivity level. When we look at productivity level, we're going to be looking at technology. When we look at agricultural density of low developed regions, they're going to have very low technology. In fact, mostly are going to be used hand tools or animal power, whereas more developed regions are going to use combines, tractors, and advanced mechanization. And also with agricultural density, low densities can mean greater productivity, which is attributed by advanced machinery and technology. When we look at arithmetic density, we can see the frequency of number of people per land area. We can see a high arithmetic density in both Pakistan, India, Bhutan, and parts of Bangladesh. Whereas China, we don't see it such a high arithmetic density because remember, 50% of the population lives in rural areas. We see another area of high arithmetic density, Japan or the Koreas on the Korean Peninsula, or we can also take a look at parts of Eastern Europe that have high arithmetic densities. Physiological density, we can see that low technology, most of the farming is going to be animate in these areas, Egypt, Colombia, parts of Southeast Asia, parts of Southwest Asia. And then we can see where there's advanced mechanization, North America, Brazil, Argentina, and then we can also see Western Europe and Eastern Europe. All right, and agricultural density. Sorry, this is where we look at machinery. Let me just go back to make sure we're certain here. This is the number of people per arable land. So when we look at Egypt or we look at Oman or Japan, they have very little food production to meet the needs of the people. And then we look at agricultural density. We can see low mechanization in these areas of the world. Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia. All those 4 regions have low mechanization, and we can see advanced productivity through mechanization and technology in these regions that are light green. All right, content objective number 1, define CBRs, CDR, and NIR, then calculate NIR. This is a continuation of objective 1 with new ICANN statements, and then compare contrast population distributions at LDCs and MDCs. CBR is the crude birth rate. It's the world average is 2.0, 20 per 1,000. That's the total number of live births every year per 1,000 people. There's the crude death rate, and that currently is 8, the number of people per 1,000 people in society that dies. And then you have the natural increase rate, which is taken CBR minus CDR, and that difference will give you a percentage of population over 100. So NIR is always over 100. CBR and CDR over 1,000. The current NIR of the world is 1.2%. We're adding about 80 million people to the world today. And remember, as I spoke earlier, most of that is in less developed regions. Nearly 1 billion have been added in the last 12 years. Our current doubling rate of population is 54 years. And as I mentioned, 95% is in less developed regions. Why do you think most growth is in LDCs? All right, think about economics, population growth, less technology, less resources. We can see CBR is highest in less developed regions, it's lowest in more developed regions. Total fertility rate is the average number of births of a woman within the lifespan of, or within the fertility years of 15 to 46. And we look at the infant mortality rate, which is 46. That's the average, 46 over 1,000. That's 46 children before the age of 1 out of 1,000 will die. And life expectancy is the average longevity of a human, which is 68.9 years on a global scale. The average number of years a newborn can expect to live at mortality rates. All right, so the patterns that we can see here through this choropleth map, we can see crude birth rate, again, follows the lowest development regions of the world. And then crude death rate will follow the similar patterns. So again, we should be able to see these patterns. And then women that have a high fertility rate, sub-Saharan Africa and Southwest Asia, parts of South Asia and parts of Central Asia, Southeast Asia, Philippines, and Laos. And then life expectancy, we can see it's highest in more developed regions. All right, and we can look at the regions of the world, and we can see where population has grown historically. European population growth in Asia historically has been the largest natural increase rate in the world in the 1800s. In the 1900s, we can see similar trends still happening. By 2000, we begin to see a reversal of natural increase rate in Europe and an increase in Asia and parts of Latin America. And then in 2050, we see a sharp increase in the continent of Africa and with also Asia slightly declining. And we'll stop there. Make sure to review the ICANN statements.